is how did you get started? How did you get started in film?
I went to uni when I finished school, interested in working in theatre, and I left. I went to uni in 1986 and did an English literature honours degree. You know, I had no idea what I wanted to do really, but ran a theatre company when I got out. I acted in a few things, directed a few plays. I didn't think film was a possible career. I just thought it was impenetrable. The only people going to film school then were really rich because it was pre-digital cameras and you had to shoot on 35mm film, and so film school was all rich kind of private school kids, and I had no chance of ever getting in there. But I luckily worked on a play where I met David Wenham called The Boys, which we put on at the Griffin Theatre in 1989. And he and I went, let's try and make that into a movie. So I applied to the film school in Sydney. Actually, I applied to the film school in Sydney and Swinburne in Melbourne. It's so funny because my 16-year-old, it's the open day for Swinburne today. We went and worked and she wanted to look at the film section and she said, well, I recognise you here. And I went, well, they didn't accept me. I didn't even get an interview. Back then, I applied for Swinburne and the film school, and there was a teacher there, a very eccentric older woman whose father had been a communist, and she really wasn't. And she saw my application, and hadn't made a film. I had never been behind a camera. I'd only ever done theatre. But I applied and said, I've done this play and I want to make it into a film, and I really believe it's important, and I'd like to go to film school to learn how to do it. And she accepted me. And to this day, I just in my career, because then there were 15 kids in my year, 15 young people in the year, and all the other 14 had made award-winning short films and various things. And I didn't even know what crossing the line meant, or what lenses were.
Was that intimidating? Like being in an environment where everyone else sort of had that kind of experience?
You know what I think? That they were all lying, a lot of them. Like they were all fluffed up. You know, to get into film school, they had to pretend that. And I was really, because I knew nothing, I was willing to ask really dumb questions about stuff I didn't know. And questions that other people might not have asked. You know, I should be careful, this is being video. They were all very good friends of mine. They were just very confident about their knowledge. Now look, I was able to be that guy that really didn't have a clue. And I'd watched films and liked them, but I didn't understand how to make them. And so rather than being intimidating, I found it like amazing and exciting. And you know, I'd already done a 4-year arts degree and then another 3 years at film school, and then it was a bit of a nightmare, the amount of institutionalised years, but it was great actually. It was really good. And I took a long-term view of what I needed to learn.
So you did that early on, you actually knew where you wanted to end up?
Interestingly, when I went to film school, I knew I wanted to make The Boys into a film. Right. That's what I knew. I didn't know if I'd make a career in film, but I thought that play, I thought we can make that into a film. And I met the guy, I didn't direct it, I produced it, but I met the guy that did direct it there. So in any of the courses, much like discussions like this, I always had this film that I wanted to make, so I could grab people and talk to them about it and try and work out how to do it. So the motivation was quite wonderful because it was motivated by the creative ambition not to be a successful filmmaker, actually just to make that film. And I think even to this day, our company structure is kind of built around the projects rather than the opportunity. So I was really blessed actually during that time to meet the people that would help me make that film when I left film school. And I made that film which filmed in 1996. So I did the play in 1991. I went to film school from 92 to 95.
Right.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to produce it instead of write and direct it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had a feeling early in my career in theatre, so coming out of uni, that no one was ever going to employ me, that I had to generate my own work.
Right.
I felt very disempowered. I didn't think any theatre companies were going to go, oh my God, we want him to direct, you know. So I formed my own theatre company in my early 20s. We put on plays, we went venues and just put on a show. And some, I don't know how we did it actually when I think back on it, like financially, or, I now understand we did things that are illegal, where you're trading into debt, like where you just had enough money to rent the first week, and if no one came, you wouldn't have enough money to pay the second week. But I think that really gave me an entrepreneurial spirit, like a kind of sense that, this is all right, I like this business stuff, like I like this kind of commercial imperative, and some people don't, but I kind of feel like filmmakers are entrepreneurs, like we're trying, and finding out how to do it, because very rarely, I think once in every generation, there might be a filmmaker that comes along, like say Jane Campion, with her film Sweetie, which is amazing, extraordinary filmmaker, a genius skill that the world will surround to help her make her work. But it's very rare, and a lot of other work gets made. So I kind of always encourage people to have an entrepreneurial flair. And so in that entrepreneurial flair, I always thought there's all of these films I want to make, and I'm the right director for these ones over here. But there are other directors who are right for other things. And that's exciting for me as an entrepreneur, because it means I get to work with people, working Santilla on a project. I mean, people that I wouldn't otherwise get to work with if I was just directing, if I was just being a director. So, yeah. So
it sounds like you're pretty strategic, because obviously you identified early on that your opportunities wouldn't be as available for you as you'd like, so you decided to be strategic about what roles you took early on. Right. So did you know when you were producing that you wanted to also write and direct? Yeah. I took my time actually. I think because I came so late to film that I took my time. Like I didn't, I directed short films when I was at film school, and I started building my skills, and I produced 2 films, The Boys and The Monkey's Mask, called Samantha Lane. And so producing those, I had a chance to see, observing and learning, and then the third film, the feature film, was one I directed. And I did that when I was 31. So I look at my career, between finishing school, going to uni, running to theatre, going back to film, producing. I didn't get to direct a feature film, which I probably had an ambition that I thought I'd like to when I was in maybe my second year of film school. So. But I think taking a long-term view was quite good. I'm just one of those people that needs to kind of build up the skills and be confident about it before I do it. Whereas there's some people that just come in and just, I'll do it, and then everything falls in behind them. I think I needed to build up a body of work that gave me confidence that I could do it. It's not to say this is still terrifying. Yeah.
I think that's what makes you great as a filmmaker, is that you do, because you are so considered, because you've taken the time to actually really understand what makes a great story. And I don't think that initially when, you might have ambitions to be a director, for example, but not necessarily understanding the development stage of a story, for example, and why that matters, and investing the time in that can be of benefit to a filmmaker in the long run.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think one of the best things that happened to me at film school was that we got to do a bit of everything. Yeah. So we had to edit something, we had to shoot something, we had to design something. You kind of built up some experience of all of the different departments. Yeah. And that gives you a vocabulary as a director, and you can work very respectfully with those different departments because you know what they're doing and how it's contributing to the whole. Yeah. There's a Polish filmmaker I love who's written a book, Andrzej Wajda, and he's written this book. He describes directing as planting seeds along the wall where you're trying to grow a vine. So you plant the seeds along the wall, and you water them, but they grow of their own accord. But as they're growing up the wall, you have to entwine them to make it stronger. And his thing is, but always remember that they're growing of their own accord. And I think there's a philosophy when you're working with a costume designer, a production designer, or a cinematographer, you're not doing their job. You're just entwining all of the jobs together to make this strong thing. And I think sometimes directors fall in the trap of being really aggressive about what they want. Whereas if you work with really amazing talent, you're more guiding the talent.
So I'm going to play a quick trailer of one of your films, Balibo, and we'll talk about that. What's your budget for that film?
The budget wasn't massive. It was $4.5 million Australian, which is very small for a big action period film. But we had a very small crew. Oscar Isaac, who plays Jose Ramos Horta, is now a massive star. It was early in his career, and he's stunning, Anthony. But the Timorese actors and performers and crew actually were incredible.
So how did you come about the story? How did you come to make it?
There was a guy I went to film school with. He was a senior. He's quite a bit older than me. He was on a literature board attachment, and one day over dinner, he told me the story of how he was the ABC journalist who was in his team during these events. He's played in the film by Simon Stone, and he told me the story about these 5 journalists that had been killed up there, and I began focusing on that story with great interest, but there were other people trying to do the story at the time. My career was very early, so I didn't have an opportunity. I couldn't make a film. I was in my 20s. But then years later, I came back to it when a bunch of Australian actors, Hugh Jackman, Anthony Powers, a whole bunch of them were talking about doing it, and I got approached. I'd done a film called The Bank with Anthony, and then I embarked on this journey to try and tell the story. But it's fascinating because the story initially was about these 5 Australian, British, New Zealand journalists who'd gone there to get killed. To tell the story and say they were killed, but the more I went to East Timor in the research, I kept travelling up there, the more I realised that East Timor had saved itself and become independent, and these men were considered a significant piece of the story, but they weren't the story. And I met Jose Ramos Horta and a lot of the Timorese who suffered terribly, and then the story's framed by a woman reflecting on the events at the time. And I met an Australian woman, journalist, Jill Jolliffe, who'd been doing a project up there called the Living Memory Project. She'd had Timorese women coming forward and going on camera and telling the story of what happened, the terrible things that happened to them, as a kind of proof. And also part of a kind of reconciliation process. So there was this massive evolution as I fell in love with this country, and the story morphed into this more complicated, story about this country's journey to independence. And then the Timorese, it was amazing. Ramos Horta is the president. He wrote me a letter which pretty much said, if Robert shows you this letter, you have to do exactly what he says. So I want to shut down roads, show it to the police. Okay, fine. Take over somewhere. We shut down the centre of Delhi to recreate the invasion of Delhi, actually. Interestingly, the film is still banned in Indonesia, but young. Is there anyone Indonesian here? Indonesian, yeah. Young Indonesian filmmakers have contacted me, and they say amongst young people in Indonesia, the film is much loved because it's on the black market there.
Also, the best way to make something popular.
That's right. It's true, and I think that young people there, it's like all of us. What do you think of our journey here in Australia to the stolen generation? And, the idea that it's possible for generations to deal with terrible things that have happened in the past. But no, it's amazing experience. So that was kind of a journey. But tricky, very tricky. When we were filming up there, the United Nations was still there. We flew in, and Ramos Horta had an assassination attempt. He had 6 bullets in his gun, and Oscar Isaac is in New York about to fly, and his manager's saying, is it true the guy Oscar's going to play is actually some people are trying to kill? And but actually, I've been back many times since and travelled there recently with my 13-year-old daughter at the time to show it. It's an amazing country, amazing country.
So how do you balance, you're obviously telling a story that's based on real life events that you've adapted for the screen. So how do you balance the authenticity of the actual events, but also the fact that you have to make an entertainment, entertaining cinematic experience for people? What was the thinking behind that, and what did you kind of decide to let go of?
Yeah.
And what did you choose to keep?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Balibo 5 were murdered. When Indonesia invaded, they were murdered. And a coroner has found that they were murdered, and I will say in the coroner inquiry. But the Australian government still says they were killed in crossfire. And the Indonesian government still says they were killed in crossfire. And it's, I mean, witnesses, I mean, it's, you know, this coroner found, she described exactly how they were killed. So, from, you know, so we decided we couldn't fake that at all. So we took the coronial findings and reproduced it exactly. I didn't use music, I showed it how, and when the coroner saw it, she said that's exactly how I imagined it from what the witnesses said. So we decided that the veracity and authenticity of that had to be, because we were showing in the film something that two major governments dispute, that we had to show. I couldn't fake it. If I'd faked that, it could have unraveled the whole film. But that story is also framed by the story of Ramos Horta and Roger Rees travelling up to East Timor together, and Roger Rees being led up to Balibo by Ramos Horta. And I fictionalised a lot of that. And there'd been a film called The Queen, which was about when Tony Blair had to go to the Queen and convince her when after Princess Diana died. And the author said that he couldn't know what they had been said, so the drama was a hypothesis about conversations between Tony Blair and the Queen. And so I hypothesised, you know, and I thought about but I fictionalised that structure. And so one of the times when I finally met Ramos Horta when I was there, and before we'd been financed, and I met him and he said, "Oh, when do you leave?" I said, "Oh, in a week, I'm going up to Balibo." He said, "Have you got the script?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, give me the script and I'll read it." And I was like, "Oh, God." You know, and decide whether, before I flew out, he'd give me permission to film. And I gave him the script, and he said, "You know, I still remember Roger Rees." He said, "I remember going down to the Turismo Hotel the day before I knew we were about to be invaded and begging him to get on." And he described this scene that I had written exactly in the script, and I just hypothesized that happened. And it gave me goosebumps, like sitting there with him going, you know, and but there's a few scenes I made up. There's a scene where he's being chased by a helicopter where it was very funny. I was out at dinner with him one time and he was there and he was chatting and saying, "I remember the time I was chased by this helicopter."
Wow.
You know, you have a bit of fun, but I knew that I couldn't fake these fundamental events, the murder of Roger Rees and the murder of these 5 journalists. And then I also grappled with, I was heavily inspired by a big article on Sight and Sound that came out when I was writing the script about the African cinema and the outsider's view and this kind of genre of white men saving the third world. And it was a very provocative article saying you cannot do this. I thought the article really affected me because it made me think, well, am I making a story about 5 white guys? And in fact, rather than kind of shy away from that, there is a massive scene in the film where Ramos Horta and Roger Rees actually have that very argument where Ramos Horta says to him, "You're just worried about these 5 white guys. My country's going to be killed. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to die." And Roger Rees says, "Yeah, but those guys are going to be on the front page of the Age. It's the only way I can get people to care." And all this battle. Because largely the Timorese consider the Balibo 5 their own because they believe we wouldn't have cared. Like Australians wouldn't have cared if they hadn't been killed. You know, you think of the tragedy of places like West Papua. Very hard to get media attention, to focus governments to care. So I took a lot of these provocative ideas and then just put them in the film and let the characters argue them out. But it's really kind of amazing opportunity to grapple with real events. But also, as you say, to make an entertaining film. I wanted it to be something that would travel the world and people would say, well, like the Americans, right? I was in the Toronto Film Festival and I'm like, where is this Balibo? It's Timor, it's like, and if it was about Vietnam, so they're arguing, I was like, okay, well, they said if it's about somewhere that America's gone. There's a lot of places they've gone and done some terrible things. Well, actually, having said that, I have got it in the film the day before Indonesia invaded East Timor. Henry Kissinger and President Ford, US President Ford, flew out of Jakarta, and they'd obviously signed off and said, don't worry, we'll let you invade it. So, but it's pretty amazing dealing with real stuff like this, making a film. It's a gift in my career. I mean, I always think the fact that I've been able to live a creative life is already a gift. Like the fact that I've made, I'm 50, I've done it since I left school, but then to go to East Timor and make this and be part of that nation's story, and we took the film, we dubbed it into Teton, the Timorese language, first film ever dubbed into Teton, and we toured it on a big inflatable cinema all around East Timor, and families would come out and kids and everyone would sit and watch this film in their own language. And as an extension of that, 2 years ago, I took my kids' film Paper Planes back, dubbed in Teton. And there was a moment for me where this creative life you live. I was in Balibo, where these events had happened in my film, Balibo. We'd filmed there. I'm there with my 13-year-old daughter, screening Paper Planes in the square, beneath where the journalists were killed. On this big everyone in the neighbourhood came out, thousands of Timorese kids kind of coming out throwing paper plates around watching it. And it all felt like all the pieces of my life were converging with these different films and all this stuff. And I rang my dad, because I was so, and my father wrote me and said I didn't make any sense. But I just couldn't believe that I could be, led to this place again with a very, very different film. But yeah, so no, it was an incredible journey.
I'll play the trail of Paper Planes shortly, but I just want to pick up on something you said with the article that you read about African cinema that made you really think, and it's something that's come up during the course of conversations today, and that's who gets to tell what story, why, and I guess for you, what sort of considerations were you making going in to tell the story, as you've acknowledged that is very much an East Timorese story in many ways, and you wanted to ensure that it was authentic to their lives and their experiences.
Yeah.
What was going on in your thought process when you were doing that?
I was troubled in my own creative process by it. I was very much aware that I was an outsider trying to make a story within the culture. I was shifting the point of view of the story to try and be told from within the Timorese experience. But I wasn't Timorese, although we had a lot of people working on the crew that had gone on. So we had a big agenda. We only brought in a small crew and used mainly Timorese. And they've gone on and made lots of their own films, in fact some really impressive films. So I I was troubled. I don't know if I'd do it again. I think the world's shifted even since 2009, and I think these stories need to be told from within the culture. Although Balibo was the first film about these events, and they had no film industry. And now there are people, and actually it's tricky. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because the French really view the value of the regard étranger, I think is the term, the view of the outsider or the stranger. And they view it as a valuable thing. And some of my favourite Australian films are made by non-Australians, like the Canadian Ted Kotcheff made Working Fright. So there is a value in people from outside a culture making a film. But the sensitivities are really tricky. For example, our company's made a lot of films recently with Indigenous filmmakers here in Australia, and our view there is that those stories really should be made from within the culture. So we help films through the business and the structure of the company, but the film Stephen Page directed a film Spear, or Joe Clerk's making the film Sweet Ads, or Katrina McKenzie's making the film Solomon, I think really that industries matured to a point where actually the story should be told from within the culture. And then I guess the issue comes up about opportunity. And then are there opportunities for people? Could a Timorese filmmaker who lives this massive population, not the biggest population outside ideally in Melbourne, but a gentleman here is Timorese, and you go, should Australia be making films, multicultural? I think Melbourne's an amazing city and massive Timorese population, so someone Timorese could make a film supported by the Australian government here. Yes, they should be able to. Would they think there'd be an opportunity to? Maybe not. And those big issues are very significant for the industry right now. Yeah.
Sorry, I just have my question is, do you think there is a right time, or not so much right, but do you think there is a crucial time for which to make a film, for example here, where things are still happening politically in between governments and historic memory hadn't sealed the event in a way? Do you think it's told in a different way when it's done then than when it's done 10 years later? Do you think there's a right time?
That's a really great question, because as Australians typically we're pretty hopeless. So about depicting, the film Peter Weir's Gallipoli, which is a great film, was made in 1977 about events that happened, 1914, 1915. We deal with things it seems to take a long time for us to be willing to scrutinise them. And Balibo was made in 2009, largely about events in 1975, so there's 34 years. People said to me, well, that's quick. But I was also grappling with the issue of independence, which was only just happening. And I think that Australia, we're pretty hopeless in terms of, even America, after the Vietnam War, the year after the Vietnam War, their filmmakers were grappling with it. The Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, there's a range, whatever you think of those films, you can see this range of filmmakers 12 months after the end of the Vietnam War kind of grappling with it. And, I ponder why we haven't had films about Australia's military presence in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the impact on our culture. And I think there's this danger that the funding bodies, you talk to people and it's like they think it should just be entertainment. Whereas historically cinema was a place that an idea would be thrown up, and cinema was the place it would be fought out by filmmakers. That great period of American cinema in the 70s, I think of, the civil rights issues, they're kind of, and so filmmakers would, and they would feel that was okay, and audiences would really enjoy that. Whereas now it's like, oh no, it should just be a form of entertainment, which I think is rubbish. I think cinema is so powerful because it does trap an audience in a space where you can't look at other devices.
Well, what's the onus on filmmakers then to create historic memory?
It's very strong. There is no depiction of the murder of the Balibo Five, as I believe it happened, other than the recreation in that film. And and I think that film will be around for a long time. The families of the Balibo Five and the Timorese feel that there's great value in that, because it has become a historic document of something. But yeah.
Do you think that the reason why it's entertainment based is because it's become revenue based, and they're following on the Hollywood model of trying to make sure they do make money in cinema?
Yeah.
But the reason why I think that it feels like they've lost the reason why people go to cinemas.
Yeah, that's true.
In a sense, like the funding bodies, and then now they're just following the American model because it's smart business.
Yeah, because it's crazy that we know that there's an age-old saying in the film industry that everyone wants to be the first person to do something second. And I want to be the kind of the first person to do something first. And the problem is everyone's second guessing, and all the most successful Australian films, the massive commercial hits, no one thought would be commercial. And so you're absolutely right. So actually just make films with something to say that come and scrutinise your motivations about why you want to make it and be idiosyncratic and specific. Like, you know, even Baz Luhrmann's obsession with ballroom dancing and Strictly Ballroom. And apparently the head of the FFC, which was the funding agency at the time, saw that film and was like horrified in what have we invested in, you know. And so I think, and then there's a whole genre after that follows. And this is interesting. The paper planes, you know, we'll talk about it after, but then there's been a lot of films emulating that. And yeah, I just think you have to be. This is my test when people talk to me about their projects, as with my producing hat on, is they have to know why. I have to see in their eye why they want to tell that story. If they go, you know what? Family films are really commercial at the moment. Blah 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 blah. It's been successful, and you know, I've had people, you have these pictures of people go, you know what I've studied? Such and such an actor was in theatre. So what I've got is an idea where that actor can be in it. It's like formula. Well, someone said the American studios, they think that, you know, you go and get the best ingredients from the best, the freshest ingredients, the best, you know, kitchen equipment and everything, and then you just put everything in a pot and stir it and think you're going to get a gourmet meal. I mean, it's
almost like it's anti-innovation and risk-averse kind of model of creativity, and creativity has never been risk-averse.
Yeah, you got a
so
massive risk appetite.
Yeah, and that's what I find really frightening. Because I was talking to my friend the other day, I was like, I don't want to go see anything in the cinema. I'd rather stay home and watch an old film.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened to me for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sort of like, well, why am I feeling this way? Because I love going to the movies.
But there's no, everything's a bit, we knew that audience, so we could make films.
Well, I can already predict the film, where I don't want to immerse myself in another story.
That's exactly the same.
That's exactly the same.
Yeah. The best advice, John Maynard, who produced Jane Campion's films and Vincent Ward's early films, he said to me when I was in my 20s, he said, if you don't have the guts to walk on the precipice of complete and utter oblivion and failure, your work will be ordinary. And he said, there is a path on the edge of, it's terrifying edge of failure, where great work is created, and you have to kind of...
It's on the cusp of the unknown.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's completely different to Balibo, by the way. So there's no recreations of any murders in there. And that one was made, I had, my daughters are 15 and 14 now, but when I made the film, when I started trying to make that film, they were really young. And I just wanted to make a film for them. And I took them to see a movie, Hannah Montana the movie, in one school. And I thought, if my kids grow up thinking heroes are Americans and don't see young kids who are there, although I get a lot of shit from my daughters that I spoil the film if you haven't seen it, but the young boy wins at the end. One of the early drafts of the script, the young Japanese girl won, and I was using my daughter Kitty to give me feedback on the script, and when she realised they changed it, that the boy had won. And the other day it was like, I was talking about another film, and she was like, oh my god, another male protagonist. But look, it was a very humble, modest film. I couldn't fund the film. I was the director of Balibo, so no one thought I had any inkling how to make a kids film. It was really hard. I pulled a lot of favours. Sam Worthington, who's in it, out of the blue one day I got an email from him. I'd only met him once, and he said, I hear you're trying to make a kids film and having a few problems financing it. Is there a role for a dad? I'll give you a hand. We need to make more films for Australian kids. And I was like, I thought it came from some weird email address. I thought it was like a hoax. And you know, David, when I just put in finance and Deborah Mailman and the young Japanese girl never acted before, and the little Maori fella who's now in Hunt for the Wilder People, who's unknown. But I guess in terms for me, it was about rectifying a balance for my kids of having stories that are told from within Australia, you know, where the heroes, because a lot of talking to my daughters when I was developing earlier what they wanted in a film. You know, they were making a film for them. They said they didn't want a film that was driven by the adults. They needed a film driven by the kids. And if you watch a lot of family films, there's still a lot of them that are driven by adults. And kids want to be empowered and they want to affect the drama and be driving every scene. And
Do you
so,
think part of the reason is what was asking the question before about thinking more about the revenue rather than the audience drives that decision? So they're sort of thinking parents are taking their kids, so perhaps the storyline should be one that adults can be entertained by, and then the kids are kind of secondary. And so you kind of just flipped it and kind of went, no, my audience are the kids.
let's market it
Despite the
to
fact that adults are bringing the kids to the movies.
Yeah, that's what. So Roadshow distributor did exactly that. They had this great idea. They released it in the second week of the January Christmas school holidays. So all these kids have been going to all the school holidays, you know, seeing all the big Pixar Disney films, seeing the trailer for this, and they marketed it. That trailer was squarely aimed at kids. You know, and so by the time it opened, kids were badgering their parents about this paper plane film, and it was a massive success. And I think it's a real danger. You know, I'm not a big fan of this thing they say that you should have. You know, Pixar do it sometimes. You have a joke for the kids and a joke for the adults. You know, the double meaning every scene. And I go, I like having a laugh with my kids. I don't like sitting with my kids having a laugh, thinking one day you'll understand. You know, and the idea that comedy that is ageist.
Yeah.
I mean, great comedy works for all ages.
Yeah.
And the guy at the end, the grandfather, you know, Terry Norris, is actually my wife's father in real life. So my kids are watching the film and there's their grandfather. And we did all these test screenings with young kids. And he was their favourite character. Because then we realised that all these little kids, they've all got like an extended family. And they have a cheeky relationship or a different relationship with. And then the other thing in the test screenings was Julian Dennison, Ed Oxendall's best mate. The kids loved him, and so I had to find. We went through the rushes trying to find more bits of him to get him in. You can't know what you're making it, but I had to make it for little kids, so we tested it for heaps of kids. Had packed cinemas where we played it for kids and to see what they thought. Because you also can't patronise children. So really, the theme of the film is. Because so many films are about parents affecting children. The theme of this film is to show children that they can affect their parents. And then Oxendall draws his father from the edge of depression. And it's a soft theme, but it's very clearly in there. It's an empowering one for kids. But I had a ball doing that. It was a lot of fun making a kids film.
How did you come across the story?
There've been these two guys who've represented Australia in the World Paper Plane Throwing Championships. The real World Paper Plane Throwing Championships are like engineering students, hot smoking, Red Bull drinking. You know, it's not. But their story was really interesting and being an Australian story. And I took that as an inspiration to actually do a story more about a younger competition. Because I was more interested in that younger audience, and it's kind of a slightly aspirational audience. It's kind of the kids in the film are like 11 and 12, but I think our target audience was like 8 and 9 and 10. But you know, it was an amazing time. The cinemas had paper plane throwing things in the foyer, and like it was like interactive kind of. You'd go and see the film come out and then throw paper planes around. Yeah.
We have time for a couple of questions before we wrap up the session. Do we have any questions for Robert? Any questions?
Yeah.
Because obviously, you make Balibo first and then switch to the kids film, where there's some problem with financing, something different. That's something that you haven't tried before. In order to secure the finance for paper plane, do you have to sort of write direct a statement to basically say that this is very dear to my heart, I should be the person
Yeah.
who made this film? Do you have to go through that process?
There were documents like that I wrote, you know, personal statements, and you're very lucky you had Sally Kaplan here this morning who spoke. You know, who's excellent at Screen Australia. That, you know, I think part of what you do as a filmmaker is you seduce people into your vision. I thought the box of paper planes was a really good way of seducing people into your vision, and it is an issue about risk and appetite for risk, and you've got to convince people to come to the edge of the precipice with you, and that it's going to be exciting and fun. And how you do that is such a combination of ways. Like, some ways are written documents, other ones are pitch. You know, I really subscribe to Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, has this view that before you write a screenplay, you should be able to tell someone the story, and that the oral tradition of feature films is really powerful. And so, you know, you should be able to set someone, even if you're not a very good oral, you should be able to just tell the story, and it should be really compelling. So I do a lot of that, you know. No one was saying every project I've made has been a nightmare to get financed. You know, they don't get easier, and that's part of the game, I think. How you articulate your ideas and your passion for it. You know.
Thank you.
My question is about writing. When you made Balibo, you're actually basing or creating fiction around actual people, existing people. How do you reconcile yourself with that? You're imagining spaces that they may not have been, or doing things that they didn't do. Do you do a lot of research? Do you base it around these people? Because in my writing, it's actually based on people who passed on, and I have difficulty sort of, you know, writing about them or imagining them in spaces, because I think, am I disrespecting the dead, or, you know, is that a cultural issue for me, or is it something that all writers go through, where you're actually dealing with actual people who have lives and who have families, but you're placing them in a fictional sort of setting?
It's a massive question that you grapple with. And I think a documentary maker is looking for a more forensic truth. And I think fiction, historical fiction, has the capacity to illuminate aspects of the human condition and reveal them in ways that are quite profound. And I worked on a film with the moral philosopher Raymond Gator, Romulus My Father, that I produced with Eric Bana. And it was about his early years and his father who died when he was a child. And we felt really, for everything you're describing, and we'd meet him and read his book and talk about it and talk to other people and try and get an insight. And he said something when he saw the film. He said, there's not one thing in your film that happened as it happened, but there's not one moment in your film that's untrue. You know, he's a moral philosopher, and that's a very big idea, but I think you should take comfort from that you're not, as a writing work of fiction based on real events, you're not seeking a truth that's a forensic, exactly what happened historically, unless of course it's like the murder of the Balibo 5 where I had to, but you're actually looking for a truth that's a more humanist, you know. So I feel exactly how you articulated it. I felt many times, and I rationalise it myself by going, I've researched this, I care about these people, I've found out about them, I've explored them, I've tried to find a truth about them that this film will illuminate, rather than worrying too much about the biographical truth. But you know, it's tricky. You know, in Romulus My Father, Raymond Gator had two sisters, and we conflated them into one. You know, and one of the two sisters was really upset at the impression that she'd been written out of history. So it is a, and we probably made the wrong decision, I think. You know, but yeah, it's a great. So I'd encourage you to just go for it, and trust your own, you know, philosophical sense of whether it's right or wrong.
I think it's a comment as well that I'd like to hear what you have to say. But as you were responding to this question, I was just thinking of Alice Walker in The Colour Purple and how she based all the characters of people in her family.
Ah, yeah.
But then she used the narrative as a way of liberating some things that would never happen in her life. Like she said, her grandmother had never ever left the farm, ever, could not leave the farm. She was just basically there to cook, clean, look after the animals. So in the narrative, she makes sure that the main character ends up having this adventure that takes her far away. She travels on a train throughout the United States. And, so it was like, but she also gave the script to her family to read, and they, there's some characters in it that did some pretty horrible things, but it was pretty true. But I think she was trying to eliminate the possibility that people can actually transform.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of humor in it for people as well. So
Yeah, I think that's.
I guess I'm kind of responding to also your comments about, like who's telling whose story and why we tell those stories. So I often find when people tell the African stories, so sad. Like it just makes me feel like I'm trapped in this victim narrative. It's like I think like part of the role and duty and obligation of the storyteller is to be able to be a missionary. Because our stories are a way of seeing ourselves and writing ourselves into the future, not just writing our history. And I think so many of us get caught up in we've got to get history factual, we have to nut it down, and it has to be exactly right. I might know some things are better forgotten, and maybe our parents are really good at forgetting something that needs to go. And we actually need to start thinking of ourselves and taking control of how we see ourselves in the future. And it's like, I think that's where, for me, the question of who gets to tell whose story becomes quite clear. It's like only I can say where I see myself in the future, nobody else can actually write that for me. Yeah.
That's interesting. Where someone could write about a historic thing from their point of view, which could be just as valid, but they can't hypothesise about the future. Yeah, I'm grappling with a lot of this with another film I'm working on about cinema's power to stir activism about things through optimism. It's an environmental film from Tim Winton. And he was telling me the story when he was a kid in Albany, there'd be one whale would pass a year, but now the ocean is full of whales because we've stopped killing them. So he says it's very optimistic. And he said in the environmental movement, there's a real feeling that stirring change right now needs optimism. Like we can all despair that the barrier reef's going to die. Global warming has killed it. Despair, bury our head, it's too late. Or, and so I've actually having this it's completely different to thematically what you're talking about, but this idea that can cinema stir activism by not showing, like we can make work that shows how terrible things are, and hopefully it makes people then go, I want to act to make sure that doesn't happen again. But can we also stir people to act by showing people and stirring in them an incredible optimism about the future that creates that? Yeah, anyway, it's
interesting.
I'm unresolved about it.
In reggae circles, like the reggae revival, so because if you listen to reggae music, so much of it was about like the poverty narrative. But now, like in the last 2 to 3 years, it's really changed, and it's changed a lot because they're making their own music videos. And it's very clear, like I'll say very clearly, it's not just about the words, the visuals are more important than the words. Because people actually remember and act on visuals more than they will ever act on words. And so if you're telling a story of sorrow and depicting sorrow, all you'll get is a repetition of the same thing. So if you look at like the international aid industry and how it portrays Africa, so we're just generating more of the same. What would happen if we actually had a different vision? And she talked about where we're going, what we want to do, what we wanted to happen, what we actually desire to happen, as opposed to I think there's something to be happening that those ideas are circulating all over.
Yeah, most queer narratives are about how queerness equals suffering and death. And it's this thing that I'm trying to really battle in creating stories, joyful stories about queerness, because there's such bad mental health, and I think part of that is fed by the fact that almost all queer characters die.
Exactly. You don't have a future.
So like that's what the message is.
It's real.
You're gonna get murdered, your lover's gonna die, you might just get hit by a car. It only happened to queer people, you know.
Exactly. That person never makes it to the last scene in a horror movie or something, right?
As like from the Timorese community, what Balibo did do is it opened the narrative. Because for me, to talk to my family, they wouldn't talk to me about these things. Now once you've seen the film or they showed it to another friend or someone else, they would be more open because they didn't have to explain or go through everything because you had a starting point. There was no starting point historically. It's part of historical fact in terms of our culture, like in terms of what was taken away and what does exist. It's a giant thing, movement forward. You look in terms of global, in terms of artistry. I'm an actor. I'm a Timorese actor, but I can't identify as a Timorese actor because there's no Timorese roles. Balibo opened that narrative. It opened that you can be somebody else. I have to, as an actor, become a character actor. I have to play other races, other kinds of people, be it Spanish or be it from any ethnicity, because I'm such mixed heritage. Colour Purple, it was in the musical Colour Purple here that was put on, that narrative, that story opens up that. It's not the words, as you say, it's the feeling of it's tone. It's, this may not be as it happened, but it gives you the impression of what did happen. And I think some of the things that Balibo gets really well, there were worse things that went on that didn't even touch upon, that come out in the middle of things that society's just not ready to hear. And there's a lot of things, that's why you get to remake things, because you get that perspective or a little bit more of that curtain gets pulled back and you start to see further and further to the truth, and then it starts to get a bit scary, so you just step back a bit. But yeah, that's it's a great thing that it was made, and I'm really respectful of it and really glad that it did get made. And it's a really personal thing, so yeah, it's thank you.
This whole day I've been thinking, why are stories important? Why do we do what we do? Why do we tell stories? And just feeling that out of work that you've made. I think that's one of the greatest things anyone who gets to tell stories hopes that their stories can do. I mean, the fact that it opened up a conversation within your family to just reconcile all of those things, that it's
I'll go home. Retire.
I mean, that's I certainly that's what I'm always aiming for. And to hear that is just, it's inspiring on so many levels to just kind of keep pushing and keep telling stories and telling diverse stories and telling all sorts of stories. Wow, thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. Any other questions? Okay.
So, with all the films you've made in different capacities, what is it that you've learned about storytelling now that you didn't know when you started off, and that you feel like it would be worthy for us to know?
No, it's a good question. Yeah, so storytelling, what I've learned.
What is the heart of storytelling for you? I trust more. So there's a Billy Wilder quote, which is, if you let the audience work out that 1 + 1 = 2, they'll love you forever. And so much storytelling now stitches all the pieces together. And I think over time I've developed more respect for the audience, not less. So I feel that my work, I did a TV show called Deep State. I filmed in Morocco last year for 7 months, and it's on SBS in August 22, 9:30. But the structure of it's very adventurous, and the way it handles the past and present, and the number of balls it keeps in the air, and it asks the audience to stitch it all together. And I think I've become more adventurous, actually, about how you can tell a story and withhold information and allow the audience, because if the audience works stuff out, they will feel ownership of the film. It's a great example with Balibo. We had an early cut
And it was so, it had no cards, you didn't know where you were. It was a mess. And we did a test screen. And the audience was weeping. People were crying, sitting outside weeping, a tragedy. And then we did the questions afterwards. Did you understand this? They didn't understand half the film, but they felt this emotion. So I went, okay, I need to put cards that tell you where you are. 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, Balibo, Dilly, So I put all these cards, and then we had a screening the next week for a completely different audience. And at the end, people kind of clapped. I looked around, no one was crying. And we did the test, and did everyone understand it? Oh yeah, it was all really clear. And so I developed this hypothesis that the clarity, the audience the week before had struggled to work it out, but that process of struggling and piecing it together, however much they did, bonded them to the story in a way that unlocked their emotions. But when I just made it, it's like putting sugar in bread. It's easy to eat, but it's not as good for your intestines. So I think if anything in my journey, it's been that to have more respect for the audience than less, and also I don't want to make films that. But I had a lot of the kids who watched paper planes. There's a lot of complicated stuff in there, and I thought, well, people said, oh, can little kids handle that emotion? And it's like, yeah, why not? And so that'd be my biggest storytelling observation. So it's okay for the audience to be confused. Part of the problem is you submit your scripts and all the investors go, oh, and you get script edited to death. This doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. You've got to, and so it's bloody hell, so you end up having to clarify.
People love.
I know, that's right.
And it's going completely into, the
Dream
subconscious.
states and the subconscious.
Yeah.
I know, very hard to make those things because you go through a process that is so trying to make it all make sense, and you go, well, anyway. Good.
Any more questions?
Best wishes with all your work, all of you. I assume you're all here because you're writers or filmmakers or storytellers in some way. Yeah. Best wishes with it. And be passionate, be outrageous, have fun, be provocative, be mischievous, and embrace, I guess, this opportunity that technology's allowed, where stories can be told very cheaply, and people can just make stuff now. The opportunity, the things. I mean, when there was a feature film in Sundance that was shot on an iPhone, I think there was no turning back. It's like people have the capacity to just go and make stuff. And that's really liberating, because it used to be that the economic parameters just trapped it in kind of a particular socio-economic group.
Well, thanks, Rob.
No worries.